Hello and welcome everyone to today's Association for Manufacturing Excellence webinar titled Rethinking HR for Operational Excellence. I'm Jerry Strohmeyer, the Education and Training Program Coordinator for AME, and I will be your moderator. Today's presenter is Cheryl Jekiel, founder and CEO of the Lean Leadership Center. She has over 30 years of manufacturing excellence and has held senior leadership roles, including Vice President of Human Resources for a number of companies. Over the years, Cheryl has developed an expertise in lean manufacturing with a particular focus on lean cultures, leadership, and talent strategy. As the author of Lean Human Resources, Redesigning HR Practices for a Culture of Continuous Improvement, she is committed to building lean HR as a recognized field of work. Cheryl is a popular speaker on HR topics, the Boston 2017 AME International Conference Chair, and she serves on the AME management team. Before we start, just a couple of housekeeping items. You will be in listen-only mode throughout the webinar. You will see that you are muted on your attendee panel on the right side of your screen. If you have questions during the webinar, please type them into your question area in the attendee panel and click on Submit. We'll review the questions at the end of today's presentation and answer as many as we can. When you log off today, please check your email inbox, and it will be an invitation and link to fill out a short webinar attendee survey. Please take a few minutes to complete the survey today, as your feedback is very important to us to improve future webinars. Cheryl has also graciously agreed to provide a PDF of today's presentation. We'll be sending that along with a recorded link for a webinar replay to each of you next week. Now I am pleased to introduce Cheryl Jekiel, who will present Rethinking HR for Operational Excellence. Take it away, Cheryl.
Hello, everyone. I'm excited to be here with you today, and I'll be providing to you a range of strategies that can help you approach HR as you work on continuous improvement or lean or operational excellence, whatever it may be in terms of how you phrase it. So we're going to be covering 10 different world-class strategies for HR that will help you in lean transformations or continuous improvement. Just to give you a quick list of them, we have Think Like a Paid Service Provider, Proactive Recruiting, the Game Changer, Gains from Standardized Training, Truly Transform Your Leadership Model, Develop Leaders Who Listen. We also have Ensure Problem Solving is Fully Implemented, Build Financial Skills of HR Professional, Reduce Wasteful HR Activities, lean cultures that require alignment, and last, focus on the most important problems. From the onset, I want to give you a sense of my background in presenting this material. I have almost 30 years of lean manufacturing or continuous improvement experience. I have almost the same amount of experience in the field of HR. So my focus in my work has been the crossover between lean and HR over really my entire career. I have been in a corporate role, many head of HR roles, as well as operational roles for most of my career. And only a few years ago, I launched the Lean Leadership Center that has been predominantly working with a number of HR groups within lean enterprises and helping them increase the value they provide to the lean transformation process. So today I'll be sharing both my own experience and those of the groups that I work with in using these strategies many times to a really significant degree in terms of being able to impact the results. So as we start, I guess the first question to start with, why rethink HR when it comes to a lean transformation? The most important piece that often is not necessarily seen from the onstart is that lean transformations typically have a number of difficulties with sustaining improving results. Oftentimes, if I ask a group, what percentage of lean transformations are considered successful, they might say 20%, or how many of them were considered either failures or did not meet expectations, and they might say 70 to 80%. So it's been well known that there are many challenges with being able to complete these transformations or long, sustainable, continuous improvement cycles. The piece that's sometimes missing is that HR is the owner of talent strategies and culture, which can be critical in solving those two issues. So sometimes when we think about what impact does lean have on HR, the thinking may initially be how can you apply continuous improvement methodologies on the HR work? Like, how could we make it more efficient or value added in the work that is done by HR? We're going to be having some strategies will apply to that, and some will focus on how can HR build lean skills and continuous improvement thinking and capabilities into the workforce. How can we build it into the talent strategies? And that is really where there's a much bigger business result. However, if you have not applied the methodologies to HR, it certainly makes it difficult for them to lead the charge with the others. So we will certainly be covering both as maybe not of equal importance, but of critical importance. So I'm going to start with the first strategy, and for each strategy, I'll give a sense of what it's referring to, and then give some, at least a case study with how it has been applied and to what results to give you a sense of how it might work. We will be covering the strategies at a basic level. I would say after this, there are a number of resources I could point you to, so I will give you the highlights of the strategy. If you would like any more information on any one of them, I'd be happy to pass along either any materials I might have, resources I might point you to, other people you could speak with. So I really want to make sure in the long run, if you're interested in any of these, that you get what you need. The first strategy is think like a paid service provider. And in the field of HR, it isn't new by any means that they provide service and have internal customers. But I have found this strategy provides them a wide range of opportunities to increase the level of service they provide. But in looking at it, as you notice this picture of a hotel staff, here's the comparison. HR in the last almost couple of decades is becoming more focused on how they can have measurable improvement. What are the metrics that apply to HR? And that has been part of the evolution to being stronger business partners by being able to measure the impact that they provide the business. But beyond that, if you think about the way that you provide feedback to different services, whether you fly in a plane or you go to a hotel or you eat in a restaurant, all of us are continually receiving little feedback surveys on the service that they use to improve their service. And how this relates to HR is, in a way, if you think about year over year, it's not that the employees or candidates feel a sense of service based upon percentage improvement, just the same way you would not be more inclined to stay at a hotel that has 11.2% improvements in the time to check in. The things that go into making you feel like you've received the service you're looking for or the experience you're looking for each person tend to be different and can ebb and flow with each different stay that you might have. Well, in the same way, if a candidate is having an experience as they come into a company or other aspects of employee services, having HR seek out more service-type survey feedback and be focused on being a service provider, more like other service industries, can help create a lot of additional input that help them increase the value of their services. An example of this, so this would be how do you rate the service, would be being able to create service ratings and ask people what they care about and what they might not care about. And the case study I have for you starts with a group that needed to improve their service reputation of the HR team. They were a sharp group of people, very capable. It was a culture that was very much a matter of wanting to have HR as a high service-oriented team. However, they found themselves part of a more traditional approach of working and struggling to figure out how they could increase their reputation for adding more value. They began to use a service survey for each hire and a number of team member services, things that included payroll, expense reports, and other employee services. What happened after they introduced these surveys is there was an increased sense of satisfaction and customer care that went up almost overnight based upon the process alone, meaning as soon as people were surveyed in these small ways, just like you might ask yourself, how do you feel every time you receive a service survey and respond? What does that tell you about the service provider by the fact that they ask you for every time you receive service, the level of satisfaction you had with that process? So that's our first strategy, and you can see one way to look about implementing that is gather the service surveys that you get whether it be in person or things that show up in your email, and ask yourself how you might use those in the future for services that you provide. The next strategy is proactive recruiting. I call this the game changer. And while it's a relatively simple concept, I've seen it have major results in terms of how recruiting is done and hence the impact on the business. So what's entailed in proactive recruiting? First of all, typically recruiting tends to be reactive, meaning once there is an identified need, somebody has given notice or there's a particular need of the business, they commonly would then come to HR and say, we now need to go hire someone, will you work on this opening? What it requires when you shift to a proactive model, it requires effective planning and forecasting, meaning the question would be, who do we need to hire in the next 6 to 12 months? Or as you sit here today, in 2018, what would our expected hires be? Not just by count, but which are the likely positions that we would have openings? Where might you have critical types of openings that you especially need to pay more attention to than others? It involves developing a queue of candidates, meaning people that you have met and talked to and are lining them up to future openings well ahead of time. In this way, these candidates are ready when needed or when pulled, to use a lean terminology. I want to provide to you a recruiting case study to give you a sense of how this might work. So there's an organization that I was working with. They were having a difficulty hiring qualified engineers. And the way this was presenting as a problem is they had received new business, and based upon the delay in being able to get the engineer, it delayed being able to bring the business in. In certain types of businesses that I've seen, engineers in particular can be extremely difficult to locate, and if relocation is required, that can take even more time to get a person located into the area. In this instance, it caused a loss of sales as in terms of the delay in starting the business. I've had another business in a similar situation had to literally walk away from new business opportunities based upon not having the appropriate level of engineers to be able to quote on the business and compete in the market. So both of these types of situations are critical to the business. So what we put in HR is a strategy to work with candidates ahead of time. They started to meet with people, have a cup of coffee, meet them for lunch, just get to know them, and basically I think of it as courting candidates and let them know that they're valuable, that they're the kind of person they'd be interested in. Oftentimes there's a thought, if the opening isn't immediate, why would the candidate want to be looking at it ahead of time? And yet from my experience, they tend to feel quite flattered that you're looking at them well ahead of time and are considering them for future employment. It also gets the entire conversation out of a reaction as to what would you do next month, and it just gets people thinking ahead of time. Even candidates a lot of times enjoy having a more proactive approach to how they might consider a job change. What we found in this instance, they were able to quickly develop a queue of candidates when their next opening for an engineer followed, as we knew it would. They had 3 people in the queue through a couple of second interviews. They picked their candidate. That person had already visited the plant, knew much about the business, and they felt more comfortable than they had typically with hiring someone that they had been getting to know over a 3 to 6 month time period. As they go forward, they have increased their number of proactive recruiting approaches to make sure whenever there is business at hand that there would not be a reason that they don't have available candidates in terms of the reason why they're not able to start business on a timely basis. The third strategy that I'm going to talk about is standardized training. And for many of you, you may or may not have much familiarity with this. I would say in the last several years of working with groups, I'm finding this topic has tremendous ability to change the results of an organization. I've also found many HR people have not necessarily become acquainted with it and the power of it, and yet it completely aligns with the kinds of practices and principles you would find in a lean enterprise. So traditionally, typical training lacks standard materials and methods to do the training. And what I mean by that, in many of the years that I've worked in many organizations I've been in, if you said, how do you train people? There would certainly be a methodology. They would say, you know, our more seasoned people or more senior people work with somebody to help train them. Maybe the new employee watches for a while. Maybe they shadow somebody, and then they learn to do the task. May have some written material, oftentimes not. And then over time, the person becomes better acquainted with how to do the work, and they, you know, come along over time. In addition, when it comes to exactly both the materials to train and the method, there would always be certainly a fair amount of variance. They thought is, you know, that you know, they just work their way through the variance, and in the end, everybody seems to get there in some amount of time. What we know then over time is any process with that much variance would produce suboptimal results. So over decades, I have become acquainted with using the methodology involved in training within industry, which is known as TWI. This is it's public, it's in public domain. You can look it up on the internet. It is not a matter of hiring a particular consultant. You can, but this material is available to anybody to look at. The point of the strategy will not be focusing on TWI only, but it is what are the key principles that you can see in this work that would shed light on how HR could impact business by focusing on the training efforts. The case study I'm going to cover here is a group that was in a critical need to have skilled people in their workforce. And they were people who work with metal fabrication, and they needed more and more people to be able to do the more complex work. And at the time that we started working together, it was taking 1 to 3 years to get the people up to a complete level. And they had not a very any formal training program. They had a general approach they took, but not any type of a formal training program. And this would be true in many organizations that I work with. Now, in addition, they had a high number of retiring employees that would take years to replace their knowledge. I've seen not only this situation in this particular organization, but I've seen it in many. Based upon the way our workforce demographics are going, there's a number of workforces that are facing higher than average numbers of retiring employees. What's critical about that is these retiring employees many times are taking with them 25 to 35 years of experience, and it can be quite time-consuming to reduce that. The type of TWI training that we're pointing at here, it is said to reduce the time to train by 50 to 75%. That's a huge savings by itself, and probably more importantly, not only does it shorten the time, is the results it provides are much stronger than typical training. And by what I mean by that is the people being trained learn the material much more completely in a way that they would be prone to not doing the task wrong. That's because TWI training has a very specific form of how job instructions are created that includes the key steps, the points to how to tell if the step is done correctly, as well as why each step is taken. And again, you can certainly look up that for more information or consider other approaches to training to do something similar. But the point is, most training is not broken down at nearly that level. Many commonly tell me in the field it's the why. They always find what's so important about it is it always explains why each step is taken. As each trainee understands the purpose of each step, it impacts how well they absorb the information and carry out the task. The benefits of all this is then found in the quality of the work, so you'll see much better improvement in quality by increasing the speed of time to train, that they're able to have their workforce ready in a shorter amount of time. Safety is improved, efficiency is improved. There is many case studies documented on dramatically improved results. For those of you that may have some familiarity with this, Toyota is actually one of the companies that brought TWI to some level of fame. It's practiced globally, and every continent there are people using this practice. Again, and that my point is not to promote TWI, but to give you a sense that training is an avenue that by standardizing it to a great degree and making things much easier to learn and more effectively learned can have a huge impact on the business results. And HR is often the owner of training, can take this as an area that increasing their strategies could have a tremendous impact. So this brings us to the fourth strategy. The fourth strategy is transforming the leadership model. And as similarly as some of the other concepts I'll be covering, I would not describe this as anything new in and of itself. It's well known in the lean community that there is traditional management, and I've noted here they might be managers who direct or would more predominantly use consequences. They might be quick to assign blame and would have a strong tendency to solve problems for their people. So if someone comes up to them and says, here's the problem I'm having, they would see their role as how to help solve that problem. The inspirational leadership linked to lean leadership is fairly different. It's a matter of coaching. So you would see a much higher level of time going to how to coach. They would use motivation versus consequences. They would focus on an approach of holding people accountable versus blame, meaning once you're in a more process environment and the focus is whether the processes work, you would move away from the who did it and more into how well did the process get the work done. This then would require a leadership team that manages or leads that way, to use a better term. And in the end, this is a type of leadership that it focuses on how they empower, or the way I commonly refer to it is lift up their team. So this model I don't think is relatively new and actually is generally commonly understood. The way I think of this, it has to do with turning the entire leadership model upside down. And while on a two-dimensional page, this is relatively easy to say, I think my point in this strategy, I'm finding that it is such a robust piece of work and so complex and requires such an extensive amount of intervention that commonly, while it is understood, most organizations that I encounter are somewhere in the middle of trying to turn that curve. I regularly, inside of companies with even 10 to 15 years of lean experience, find that there are many people unaware of what this would really take to implement. There's some aware of a shift in leadership, but not a complete understanding to what degree. Going back to the prior page, it's a matter of being able to put in concrete terms what would be the current role compared to the new role, both in what percentage of their time, so to speak, is doing what are the new underlying skills that need to be developed, and what is the plan for achieving them. In that way, I'm going to bring some of those points to light in the case study. I was working with an organization. They have at least 15 years of experience in lean and are considered a leader of the lean community. They oftentimes are able to reflect and showcase different aspects of achievement they've had. However, at a certain point, they were finding that they were struggling to get some areas of accomplishment using their lean activities that they were looking for, and some initial standards that had been in place were not holding up very well over time in terms of continuous improvement methodologies. So they realized the need as part of this to overhaul their leadership model and develop what they would call the defined needed skills. Because as they looked into the root cause as to why they were not getting the complete transformation they were looking for, many of the issues linked back to people in leadership roles who were ill-equipped to lead in this newly defined way. And this is what I'm finding is a very, very common situation. So they have implemented comprehensive development plans. So as they redefine what the new role is, including building that into the specific job specifications and general understanding of what the leadership roles are and the expectations. They established what kind of development needed to happen to help that take place. In addition, it's also commonly true that of all the leaders that need to come through this, turning the upside down approach, that they create dual career tracks for those people in leadership roles that the new requirements may not work well with them. One way I think of this, if lean commonly has a practice in the plants called, in terms of balancing the load. The idea is that the parts being manufactured or product being manufactured can bottleneck in certain places, and so lean helps ensure that you step back and take a broader look and figure out how to balance the work so that it's flowing. I find that that concept applies very much to this concept of leadership. Things tend to bottleneck at the need to provide more coaching and for leaders to be able to train their teams to solve their own problems, and yet the skills to do that many times may not be prevalent enough to do so. And commonly, you'll have people you are asking to make this change that you are not utilizing their natural strengths, and you're putting them in a situation where they're working well out of their comfort zone. In this way, I think it's important to look at, here's an opportunity to balance out the skills. Be aware of where every leadership position is defined as having to have the identical skill set. How can you think out of the box and redefine how work is being done to balance out the strengths across different roles instead of assuming each and every person would have to hit the same approach to their work? So I don't have only one answer to this. What I would encourage people to do is think out of the box, explore various approaches to how leadership operates, try doing things differently, similar to how lean applies to how plants operate. Use this as an opportunity to explore a wide variety of options as to how different leadership roles could be carried out. So now moving on to our fifth strategy, which is one of my very favorites, is this has to do with developing leaders who listen. And as we just touched on what these new skills or more predominant skills are for the lean leadership model, you'll find one of the most important one is, and most initial one, is ensuring that you have leaders who are able to effectively listen. This certainly supports the idea that lean or improvement requires respect for people. In addition, it focuses on how, just through the practice of listening, this would create engagement, improve morale, and better relationships, which inherently are the foundations for a lean culture. And I'm going to review this in terms of a case study that is focused on a very specific practice that helps leaders build their listening skills. Commonly, when you look at listening skill training or skill development, and you review various ways that you can improve listening, I will find that people will struggle with how to implement the listening skills, like in what specific way will they build those skills. So we have this company, and working with them, it's not uncommon. I've had this for many years. What presented itself as the problem are employee relations issues. In this case, there was a couple of legal issues that showed up, and when we looked at the root cause, we had some of the management or leadership was not necessarily in very direct communication with some of the underlying issues going on in the plant environment. In addition, they were having challenges with getting the lean culture they were looking for. And in addition, they had a number of people in supervisory roles who had not had very developed supervisory training. And so their ability to respond to situations effectively was somewhat limited without having those skills built. So what we introduced, which was a relatively simple intervention that had a huge impact, we've had them put in small group meetings once a month for 1 hour. And these meetings, which I'll talk about in a minute a little more deeply, it's simply an hour where the leader can sit with a group of 6 to 8 people and spends the entire meeting just listening. And while this might sound simple, it's certainly, I found for most leaders, it's quite challenging. And what the impact of the meetings in general is, it has greatly improved the morale, the relationships, and the trust. In fact, recently they were at a town hall meeting, and they went through the last round of meetings. What were the issues that were identified? What actions had been taken in response to that? And that, you know, we're speaking to the fact that, again, over time, all the employees would be involved in these meetings, and there was a standing ovation. And they were surprised by that. But what I think that many leaders might not appreciate, the very act of listening to people for an entire hour, that the only thing the leader is saying in response is asking clarifying questions and only seeking to understand. It brings the leader out of a problem-solving mode, out of reacting to comments or criticisms of what's happening, and only seeking to understand for this entire 1 hour period. And here's the highlight of what the purpose of these meetings are, that this can create in 1 hour a month, it can almost completely change the sense of how the culture is operating. These meetings are used to surface the ideas and concerns. It creates a safe place to open up communication lines, and it builds relationships between leaderships and their teams. The way I came about this work initially is I kept, HR people are often called in when there's a problem. So by the time the employees are complaining about their leader loudly enough to bring somebody in, at this point there is already a problem. And I have found these use of these meetings is a very proactive way to make sure whatever concerns a team is having, that they raise them with their leader directly. What I found over time, if you could open up the communication lines on a regular basis, it made it much more, almost highly unlikely that they would eventually need to reach out for someone else to intercede if they had open communication lines. I also typically found that commonly a leader required some support with this process. We always start with having someone partner with them to support them in staying in a listening mode for the entire 1 hour period. So this has been, again, I have a packet that would describe to any of you how you might want to implement that you can just take and use. If anybody's interested in that, just let me know. The sixth strategy is fully implemented problem solving. This is ensuring your teams have the right problem solving tools. I have not seen really any organization practicing continuous improvement that is not actively practicing problem solving. A3 type problem solving, DMAIC, there's different models, but generally speaking, any amount of continuous improvement will be linked to some amount of problem solving activity using some type of a model. So that is a foundation experience that I've seen in all these work environments, but what I don't see necessarily is a fully implemented problem solving model. And what I mean by that is that if you come up and more thoroughly evaluate the level of problem solving, you will commonly see where either weaknesses or where the problem solving is not going deeply enough or being applied broadly enough to have the impact that is desired. So the strategy here is how to ensure the problem solving model that you're following is in fact fully implemented. And I'm going to give just a few highlights about what this might look like. First, you need a complete vision for what comprehensive problem solving looks like. So don't stop at, we use this, let's say for the sake of our conversation today, A3 problem solving, and here's the template, and here's the training, and here you can see the templates on the wall. Go deeper and get a clear sense of what you expect to be getting out of the problem solving. How will you know if it's happening? How broadly is it being done? How deep is the problem solving? So there's a wide range of things to consider if the problem solving model that you are implementing or using is in fact doing what you think it would be doing. In addition, the training is oftentimes, from what I'm seeing, is problem solving is being presented so quickly and at such a surface level that the people who come through the training have not actually built the skills that you might think they have. For instance, root cause analysis as a skill, I'm finding it's commonly relatively weak even when people are coming through what would have been considered the training that would have taught them to do it. In addition, just like any skill, it's a matter of practice. So talking about, again, the comprehensive vision, it's making clear what's the plan for everybody to practice the skill. Third, one thing I've found of great benefit is to have the leaders involved in training others. In any skill development, when the team members are taught to do a skill and the people that their immediate supervisors or managers are uninvolved or not working in a similar way, they simply will revert to their pre-trained status and will not generally practice skills that nobody's actively working with them on. One way to circumvent that is to ensure, if you're implementing problem-solving training, is to ensure that supervisors, leads, much less department leaders, general managers, plant managers are all actively training the material. In that way, I think you might want to consider approaches, working sessions that are shorter, but just like the saying always is, whatever you teach, you learn. And you want to make sure that people in coaching roles around problem solving are certainly of the most adept at not only having their own skill level strong enough, and that they are also equally able to coach others to build their skills. So I would encourage you then to develop comprehensive implementation plans against your vision to make sure not well beyond just the implementation of the training, that you have a plan for how to practice and as well as assess. And the last point here, number 5, PDCA for problem solving. Basically, the way I think of it, it's the A3 for your A3s, or it's the continuous improvement event for looking at how you're doing continuous improvement. Especially after you've been doing continuous improvement or lean transformations for some time, it can become almost out of view to take a look at how well that's operating. And yet that's essential for ensuring that the quality of that work is increasing over time, or certainly is even at the level that people are assuming it. So you want to ask yourself, how do we measure problem solving? That might be with how many people are involved doing it. You can use survey results on different aspects. You could check sustainability, adequacy of action planning. You could check root cause analysis, how much of the learning is being applied broadly. There's a range of things that you could measure to evaluate whether or not the level of problem solving is as you intend in the vision for your organization. So here's an example of a reflection that you might use and hand to your teams. This is something that one of the groups that I work with developed. Rather than create a process of somebody else critiquing their problem solving, they developed this process for the teams to self-evaluate their level of problem solving. So do key processes have cycles of improvement? It evaluated, the team self-evaluated their level of root cause analysis. Then they looked at whether the solutions they developed were well implemented and sustained. They wanted greater team involvement, so they evaluated that. And then they looked at how the workload of the solutions was spread out. Each team might have a different type of reflection that they want to have. What I do want to call out here, this just self-reflection tool had huge results. It was almost shocking how quickly the team was able to see the weaknesses in their work. They welcomed that understanding and then reached out for the kind of interventions or additional support or coaching they needed, or changes in their standard approaches to work to create the countermeasures to these weaknesses. So it became obvious that while the focus had always been on what were the problem solving, what was it focused on, the projects, what were the areas of the business that the problem solving was used on, and that they stood much to gain by looking at the quality of the improvement process itself. So that's another critical way HR can help in that. Some might ask, so how would HR be involved in that? I've quickly found that even if HR has not had a extensive lean exposure to continuous improvement skills, they, based upon their backgrounds, are quickly able to evaluate problem-solving capabilities quite quickly. Even if they don't know technically the area of specific projects, they can tell whether or not they see the skills being developed from the training, whether root cause analysis looks to be adequate. They're certainly well able to establish whether materials are being, action plans look adequate, and whether things are sustainable. And it's not for them to solve that, but they can participate in championing activities that do evaluate the level of problem-solving skills and can be champions of how that skill develops over time. That brings us to our 7th strategy. And this one I call building improvement skills, and that builds on the last strategy. I'm finding over time that many people don't necessarily look at continuous improvement as a matter of a skill development. And in this way, HR needs to build their skills in order to help that. And then specifically, it's the financial skills that would help them relate to the improvement skills. And we'll talk about that in some depth. For example, HR needs to be able to calculate the benefits of building improvement skills that justify the investment. One of the most common things we see in research in terms of why improvement or lean activities are seen as either failing to meet expectations or sometimes cease to have the focus that they did is it's pointed to that senior leadership team may find over time that whatever was the expectation from the activity failed to meet their needs or what they expected, and so they do not give it the focus and priority that some might think it is certainly valued. From the many years I've worked with a variety of companies in and around the Association for Manufacturing Excellence as the sponsor of this webinar, they commonly would say, what I need help with is getting the senior management to understand the value of this work. They know from their own exposure or experience how valuable it is, but they need help helping their senior team see the value of it. And what I found fundamentally to be the issue is it's the way we first think of what improvement means in terms of the skilled workforce it creates. So here is just a simple list of skills that you might think of. So if you look at all the improvement activities you have in your workplace, what kinds of skills are being built as those activities are being done? So it could be just simply from those skills are developed from being involved in the activities. Over time, they would have a demonstrated ability with continuous improvement methodologies like root cause analysis, 8 ways, other kinds of improvements. You would have a workforce that works by a sustainable process, so they would be well aware of other processes they touch, who feeds their area, areas that they feed, understanding the entire value stream. Their problem-solving skills are built over time, so understanding how do you get under why things are happening, how can they participate in the solutions, and that you have leadership rooted in engaging teamwork. So you're going to have that whole entire set of skills that we talked about earlier. The point of this strategy is, so what are these skills worth? So if you were to think about their financial worth, and this is what creates the disconnect. So when people are pointing to why does senior management not understand the value of lean implementation, it's often because there's a disconnect in the nature of the language. If I will ask a typical group, what language do CEOs speak? They'll all respond numbers. If I say, what does your board of directors, what language do they speak? They say numbers. And yet when we talk about the skills of this workforce or improvement activities in general, if I ask how do you convert that to dollars, 9 out of 10 times or 10 out of 10 times, the group will tell me there isn't a clear way to turn it into dollars. And hence the reason for that creates the reason why there's a failure to communicate. And yet if you were to ask, is a workforce with this kind of set of skills more valuable by a great degree, it would be obvious, hands down. If you had one workforce that is traditional and does not know how to work by process, does not know how to participate in problem solving, does not understand the larger business picture or their role in achieving business goals, if you have leaders that are not able to create higher engaged problem solving workforces, it would have to be costly compared to the type that you could create, which is a workforce. I would call it creating a workforce of problem solvers. So what we're going to talk about next in this strategy is closing that gap between the struggle to turn it into dollars and how you might go about that. If you ask typically a group who is experienced at continuous improvement where it would impact their financial statement, following is a list of where it might show. The first most commonly understood is reduced costs. So if you looked in a set of financial statements, you would see under either expenses that go to people or labor, raw material, those kinds of costs would be reduced. Particular, you might see if you have improved quality, you'll have a lower cost of quality, which could be seen depending upon how financial statements are structured, maybe levels of scrap or rework. Cost of quality in different businesses would be reflected different ways. Third, which often is the largest improvement of all, valuable improvement of all, is in revenues. I oftentimes meet companies that want to pursue lean transformations because they know that they can obtain customers more easily if they have these practices well entrenched. In fact, my very first experience with continuous improvement involved, we had a customer that we were one of many suppliers, and there was a quality problem from having implemented many of these kinds of much broader continuous improvement practices based upon how our teams showed up to resolve the quality issues. They then gave us many millions of dollars of business based upon being able to tell that the quality, or that the approach to improvement or fixing quality problems was so superior that it was worth making us the sole supplier of that product. And last but not least, and oftentimes not necessarily linked to actual dollar values, is the value of the engaged workforce. Gallup and other research is available readily, not hard to find, will demonstrate that engaged workforces, if you can actually distinctly, like Gallup would be one that you could actually measure the level of engagement, is associated with higher levels of profitability. So it's not just an engaged workforce is a happier workforce, they're actually more productive. There is very scientific research that shows as you have increased levels of engagement, you have increased levels of results. So what is the role of HR with this? So they oftentimes are close to the decisions being made with where to invest in improvement, like training and other skill development related to improvement skills. If they are not able to speak to what level of investment would relate to these results, it doesn't leave them well equipped to help make those justifications. So the next question that always shows up with, so how do I convert developing improvement skills into dollars, is the rule of thumb that I use is a 1% estimation to start. So the way in working with teams, the way you might think about it, ask your group, if we have 1% less labor, what does it equate to in dollars? That could be overall labor, direct labor, indirect labor, but just go into the financial statements and say if it's better by 1%, what does it equate to in dollars? That could be at a plant level or at a corporate-wide level. The next one, if we have 1% lower cost of quality, where specifically would that show up in dollars? If we have 1% increased revenue, what would that be in dollars? As you look at revenue, you could also look at what would a 1% increase in profitability be in dollars. None of these calculations takes any amount of extensive financial background. I commonly find HR people sit down with their CFO or other financial counterparts, and they are more than happy to walk them through what these numbers would be. And as I've mentioned, the reason why it's so important is these are the numbers that drive the understanding of why would we be investing in building a skilled workforce in the area of improvement. To use an improvement ROI case study, I had a group that the HR group was generally reactive to the hiring needs, meaning they would only pursue an opening once they were asked to go fill a need. And in this particular case, they had a purchasing manager that had been on hold. They came forward, made a recommendation to hire this purchasing manager, and they had a 1% improvement in materials. And in the end, the basic lesson here is they made their financial goals for the year simply by hiring that purchasing manager who had made that 1% gain in materials. And had they not spoken up on that strategy, then that would not have been able to achieve those results. What was more noteworthy in this is that the HR team had their eye on what the value of that hire was. It was not just a matter of we hired a person, they understood the value to the business in dollars that related to that hire. The eighth strategy is reducing wasted activity. Many of you might be familiar with the 8 wastes. I commonly find HR groups are concerned that they are too buried in administration and wasted time to be able to add the value that they would like. So here's an example. If you want me to send this to you, I'm happy to do for it. This is 8 wastes as it applies to HR. And HR are also the champions of the fourth type of waste, so this is another way that it applies them. This strategy, just what I would encourage people to do is get your have HR groups, each HR professional, looking at how they can use the identification of waste and removal of that to free up their time to have more strategic impact. And I would encourage them to put the investments that they need to in time to get things of administration, wasted time, time correcting activity, even handling employee relations issues that would be better handled elsewhere. The ninth strategy is a matter of lean cultures require alignment. So in this way, you want to ensure that every aspect that HR handles, that all aspects of the talent strategy are aligned to the lean culture. The key points here would be, here I have just a quick overview about what a lean culture might be defined as. You can use this one or one of your own, but the key issue here is I commonly find that HR or in general companies do not have a defined sense of what a lean culture is. So once you have a definition of the culture, as you might use this as an example, you want to make sure that that defined culture turns into how are job roles defined. Those would be both leadership roles as well as any other role. How does that then impact the hiring requirements to different kinds of jobs? What kinds of development plans are needed? What types of performance management systems might need to be in place that would support those cultures? And what kinds of recognition and reward programs? What I find the big lesson here is commonly, it's not almost always, when I'm working with organizations and ask if each of these areas has been aligned with the, their continuous improvement strategies, their activities, even the lean culture that they are trying to put in, you will immediately find disconnects. And what those create for employees or team members, they're always watching for what you do, not what you say. And I commonly hear employees saying, this is what they say we're doing, but what they do, and however they're evaluated or rewarded are some of the strongest signals they get about what matters. Or I've seen continuous improvement is on the side, but what they feel like is expected is other objectives that are set in front of them. So if all these things are not aligned, it's one of the reasons why lean transformations may struggle to succeed. And the last point I'll leave you with today is the 10th strategy is to ensure there's a strategic focus on the most important thing. And while I have often found myself almost surprised as I get to know a business or have been in business, over my career. If you stopped and said at any one time, if the focus of HR is aligned with the largest roadblocks of the business, it oftentimes is not. So this entails ensuring that the traditional HR activities can easily keep the focus off of the most important strategic challenges in the business. An easy way to ask is, one, does your HR group have a sense of what the most important thing is and how well aligned do they think their focus is to that issue? So you're going to want to check their strategies against that. And then in addition, once they are focused on it, HR can be a wealth of resources to further enhance how the core business strategies are being supported to help them be more successful. A quick case study that I'll give you before we end is I had a group and they were I was working with, and they are very talented, very sharp, and determined to add as much impact and be as impactful as possible. And they were overloaded though with projects and regular work, and as is almost always the case, they were working long weeks, even some weekends, and contributing to the greatest degree that they knew how. And yet it was obvious that there was some key major business concerns that kept kind of showing up here and there. They were having significant on-time delivery issues, and as they were coming down into the 70% of on-time delivery, they were commenting on it, but they were so busy with their initial projects and strategies that they committed to, they hadn't really stopped and asked if they were really putting their effort where it would do the most good. As we worked together on whether they had the right strategic focus, we had them shift their strong focus onto the on-time delivery. They were hugely helpful. They created a number of the strategies that made a huge difference in turning that tide and involving the entire work team in making the changes needed to improve the on-time delivery. And while they had to renegotiate their strategies for the year, their business partners were extremely pleased that they had shifted their priorities. So that's just the last area I'll touch on today as a potential opportunity to improve how HR is supporting the business. So that's it with our presentation today. At the end, I just want to mention we have a Lean People Development Summit in Savannah, Georgia. Here's the link, so when you receive your package, you can look this up. There'll be all kinds of presentations on lean cultures, leadership development, and talent strategies. We then have in AME a new Champions of HR for Excellence group. We will have 4 events in 2008. 2 have already been established. Here is the link to the Champions of HR for Excellence group, of which we welcome any and all people to inquire and hopefully participate. And then last, we have the AME International Conference in Boston, October 9th through the 13th. Here's the link to get more information. This is the largest lean conference in the world. We expect, I would say, close to 2,000 of my closest friends are coming to visit with us in Boston, so I encourage you to attend that as well. As I close, here's how to reach me. Again, any of the things you might have heard today, if you want more information, I'd be happy. I'll simply ship off to you anything I can give you that might be of some help to you. Happy to do so. And that's it for today.
Great. Thank you, Cheryl. And now we'll review any questions. If you do have any questions, please submit them on the right side of your screen. Here's one. Regarding point number 7, can you give an example on how to calculate the value of improved skills?
Yeah, so one way I might think of it, so let's say you were going to be investing in problem solving. The first question I might ask is if these teams are out doing problem solving, where do we think it'll impact the results? And there might be typically in a plant where they say maybe we're at one level of efficiency and the budget was built for us to improve, but there isn't a direct link between how these project teams would impact that number. So again, the way I start is if you were 1% more efficient, what would that mean to your in dollars? So a lot of the initial exercise is to get into the financial statements, and for whatever improvement skills and activities you have, where do you think it will hit the actual financials of your business, and do 1% calculations just as a place to start. By the way, in terms of the ROI, remember how I mentioned, by the way, engagement is linked with improved profitability. By the way, it's about 10%. By using 1% estimates, you're going more conservative. And when you look at all lean activities, problem solving, all of that, it's identical to the kinds of things that build an engaged workforce. So again, as an example, you would find out if we were 1% profitable from being more highly engaged and you were prepared to measure it, what would we expect that to turn into in dollars? I do have improvementroi.com. I have a longer template. If you reach out to me, I'll make sure you get it. I have more detail and sample templates on how to do that exercise.
Okay, thank you. And it looks like we've got one more question. What is the biggest concern with how HR is supporting lean transformations?
You know, my biggest concern is that they are so commonly not fully involved. And there's many HR professionals I've met in lean enterprises that are extremely capable, very bright and dedicated, strategic, but it's simply not clear to them what their role is in a lean transformation. And even if they have some idea, it's not been very fully fleshed out for them. So my biggest concern is that HR needs to become much more aware of what they could do in the world of lean transformation and become the champions of this that they could be. The way I commonly say it, move from the back of the room to the front. So that would be my greatest concern.
Okay, great. And thank you everyone for your questions. And thank you, Cheryl, for a very informative presentation. Our next scheduled webinar will be on Thursday, July 27th, titled Employee Engagement and Culture Change, Driven by Lean Safety with Robert Hafey. Please visit AME.org under the AME Events and Training tab for more information and to register. Please don't forget to fill out the short survey that will be in your inbox. Thank you everyone for attending and have a productive day.